There's a common assumption among many Christians that Torah Judaism is devoid of private, personal prayer. The reality is quite the contrary. Personal prayer is a daily obligation in Torah, and one who doesn't pray from the heart is in violation of Jewish law. This is very clearly indicated in the laws of prayer of the Mishneh Torah, chapter 5, the 13th law, where it says, after one lifts his head from the fifth bow of the formalized standing prayer, he sits upon the ground and falls upon his face to the ground and supplicates any supplications that he desires. In addition to this, even while saying the standardized standing prayer, which precedes this falling upon one's face and the obligation of saying supplications according to one's desire, even in the standing prayer, which consists of 19 blessings, within the 13 middle blessings, one is allowed and is completely proper to add your own words in any of those 13 middle blessings according to the topic of each of those 13 blessings, which were ordered in order to cover many of the major common needs of the average individual, which he may want to request during his prayers. This you can find in the first chapter of the Laws of Prayer and the 9th law. Beyond this, just as we find in the Torah that one is allowed to bring voluntary sacrifices to the temple, likewise we're totally allowed to say voluntary prayers, including a voluntary standardized prayer, in addition to the set number established by the Mosaic Court. One could theoretically say such prayers all day long, so long as he wouldn't be violating any other commandments in doing so. But this would necessitate that he have proper intention in all of these prayers, because otherwise he's saying the Creator's name in vain and not praying whatsoever. Prayer without intention is not considered prayer in Jewish law, and in fact the law greatly discourages a Jew from mindlessly saying the formalized prayer, just spitting the words out of his mouth without thinking about what they mean, by the fact that if he doesn't have intention, a minimal amount of intention, and awareness that he's standing before the Creator and saying these words, then he's obligated to say the required prayers all over again, with intention. Otherwise, he did not fulfill his obligation whatsoever. This can be found in the 4th chapter of the Laws of Prayer, the 15th law. Formalized prayer has biblical precedent. You can see this in the Torah itself, the Aaronic blessing, where the priests, the sons of Aaron, are commanded by the Almighty Himself to recite a standard formal blessing upon the people of Israel, a prayer that the Almighty will watch over them and guard them and keep them and grant them peace. Likewise, an entire book of the Bible is standardized prayer, the book of Psalms. Yes, singing is a form of prayer when it's directed to the Almighty. So even our average evangelistic or charismatic church, however free from formalism they may imagine themselves to be, also have forms of standardized prayer. There's nothing wrong with that. The formalized prayer that is said by the Jewish people today is a result of the exile which had occurred during the generation of Ezra. Before that time, the Jewish people, though already obligated in daily prayers, they were entirely allowed, just as we are today. There were no standard formalized prayer before the time of Ezra's generation. They were able to say everything in their own words, only that they followed certain guidelines, such as not to pray towards anything other than the Creator, obviously, and that their prayer, their daily prayer, consists of praise, request, and thanksgiving. Otherwise, the prayer is not considered complete, fulfilling the obligation. Now, during Ezra's generation, the Bible records how certain substantial groups of the Israelites, as a result of having been born in the exile, were no longer fluent in the Hebrew language, and in fact weren't fluent in any particular language. They spoke a mixed language and were not able to express themselves eloquently. As a result, Ezra and the Mosaic court of his generation, of which he was a member, established a decree that the people of Israel recite the formalized text of prayer, which they established at that time, which today we still recite, in order to strengthen and increase the people of Israel's knowledge of Hebrew. Even if it's at a minimal, at least that it would have a certain level of, that they would have a certain level of knowledge in Hebrew upon which to build, and so that they'd be able to eloquently express themselves to the Creator. This is still very much of use today. The other reasons for the standardized prayer is to serve as a guideline for how to order our thoughts. It doesn't take much experience among Christian groups, for those who have experience among Christians, to know that when praying off the top of your head, from your heart, hopefully, sometimes it takes a little while to work yourself into the right mind frame, in order that the heart is one with the words. And this may very well be the reason why all churches use songs within their worship service to help invoke that state of being. Likewise, the standardized prayer, as I mentioned earlier, puts our prayers, our thankfulness to the Almighty, and our requests and thanksgiving in a set format, so that we're not at loss for words when we may be at loss for words. And its ultimate purpose is to lead up to the same type of prayer that already existed before the formalized prayer was established by Ezra's court. And that is, as I mentioned in the beginning of this clip, the personal prayer, which is obligatory at the end of every daily prayer in the Jewish person's life. That is when one falls prostrate before the sustainer of existence, having been prepared by the formalized prayer, his mind in awe of the greatness of the Almighty that he recounted in the prayer established by the Mosaic court. And as a result, when he falls upon his face, he feels and knows the awesomeness of the Creator, and is then able to fully surrender himself and hand over his life once again to the Almighty, to be renewed, as the Torah states, that its entire purpose and its result is the renewal of the soul. As it says, Torah of anointed me more, Shivat nofesh. Torah of the Lord is whole, restoring the soul. And we should not forget, it says in Proverbs, he who turns his ear away from hearing the Torah, the instruction of the Almighty granted to Moses, even his prayer is an abomination. Blessed and exalted is he above all our mistakenness.